To code fast or to code well? This kind of question always sparks a heated debate when it's thrown into a developer community. Developers tend to split into two camps. On one side, you have the business-driven devs who want to ship as fast as possible, even if the code is complete disaster. On the other, you have the clean code fanatics, the preachers of TDD, BDD, and all the rigid best practices, who believe that every project should follow the standards from the very first line of code. But instead of an ideological war, what if we took a rational approach to code quality? Keep listening, because by the end of this you will understand that the right amount of code quality is never about personal beliefs. It is always dictated by the maturity level of your project. My name is Alexey Klenin. I am a senior software developer with more than 10 years of experience. I have had the opportunity to bring multiple projects from the first line of code to production, be it commercial products or open source. On this channel, we talk about software development without lies or propaganda. In this video, we will take on the role of the builder, the one who brings an IT project for the first line of code to its commercial version. And by project, I mean anything. A SaaS, a mobile app, a desktop tool, even a command line script, or an open source library. Because the way we develop them follows the same principles. So what is the right approach to code quality at the early stages of a project? The first thing to understand is that every IT project, no matter what it is, goes through three key phases: the proof of concept, the minimal viable product, and the first commercial version. And at each of these stages, your approach to code quality should change dramatically. Why? Because the focus of each stage is completely different. So, let's talk about the first stage, the proof of concept. When you are in this phase, your number one priority is to create value. And for that, you have to ignore code quality completely. Why? Because you don't even know if your idea works. Forget everything about clean code, TDD, BDD, architecture, scalability. Put case directly in the code, write everything in one file. It does not matter. In this stage, your code only needs to meet three requirements. It should compile, it should execute, and it should deliver what is expected. Write the dirtiest code you want, but make it fast. Don't focus on anything else but results. Use prototyping tools like Jupyter Playbook. If you're working on something graphical, use processing. If you're testing an algorithm, a simple script is enough. But while you ignore everything else, there is one thing you should never compromise on: the value delivered. Your prototype must provide the most value possible. Why? Because when you move past this stage, your project's value will not increase. It will become more complex. It will get a better user interface, but the core value will remain the same. So if your prototype doesn't deliver enough value, throw it into the trash and move on to another idea. Now let's say your idea works. It makes sense, you decide to present it to the public. Now you need to build a minimal viable product, the famous MVP. At this stage, your goal shifts. You have built something valuable, but right now, it only exists on your computer. you need to bring it to your users. And to do that, you need to focus on the interface. And when I say interface, I mean it in the broadest sense possible. If you are building a SaaS or a mobile app, it is UI. If you are writing a command line tool, it is the arguments and the documentation. If you are developing an open source library, it is the classes and methods that your library exposes to other programmers. The interface is the bridge that delivers value to the user. And now, for the first time, you have to start thinking about code quality. Not because of you want it, but because if you don't, your project won't even reach the users. The biggest mistakes founders make is thinking that an MVP is something they can throw together in a week. But MVP stands for minimal viable product. And while most founders fixate on the M for minimal, they should be paying much more attention to the V and P, viable product. It is not easy to make a product viable. To be viable, your product must be publicly accessible. If people can't access it, they won't try it. It must be attractive enough to convince users to give it a shot. And most importantly, it must not crash at every unexpected input. If your software breaks on first use, people will forget about it instantly. So here's the reality. To build an MVP, you need at least 1 month of full-time work, probably including weekends. This is serious effort. And if you don't put in that effort to ensure some level of quality, your project will fall apart before it even gets a chance to face real users. At the MVP stage, it's the interface that will determine if users will try your product. But it is the quality of the code that will determine if you even reach that stage. Now, after a month of hard work and sleepless nights, you finally have an MVP. Do you think this is the time to focus on clean code? The answer is no. Now that your product is finally in front of real users, you are preparing version 1. And to achieve that, your focus shifts again. Now you need to generate revenue if it is a commercial product, or to increase adoption if it is open source. And for that, you need to listen to your users and iterate fast. During this phase, even some critical bugs can be ignored. If they don't significantly impact the user experience, they can wait. And here another thing. Sometimes during the preparation of version 1, you realize that your initial idea wasn't that great. So you have to go back to phase 1 and then phase 2, sometimes a few times. But now you might be asking, Alexei, after everything you just said, does this mean that TDD, BDD, clean code have no use at all? Of course they do. But they make sense only for stable projects with a steady revenue. And again, this is not about beliefs. Once a project reaches a certain scale, if you don't implement strict quality standards, your performance and the performance of your team will collapse. Yes, TDD, BDD, and clean code add overhead. You will not iterate as fast as before, but they will ensure that you progress at a steady, predictable pace. And in a project that is already in production, that's invaluable. Another thing to keep in mind, between writing the first line of code and making your software the workhorse of your company, your team will probably grow. The bigger the team, the more organization it needs. This is not fun, but this is the price of effective collaboration. A rigid framework that enforces homogeneity makes the code understandable to everyone in the team. And that's invaluable. Because in IT, working with computers is easy. The real challenge is working with other developers. That's all for today. If you found this useful, make sure to like and subscribe. If you agree or disagree, let me know in the comments. And if you're starting a new IT project and want to avoid costly mistakes, feel free to reach out using the links in the description.